What would you do if the people you loved most were blind to the monster in their midst? I was 16 when I first saw the truth about my brother, Daniel, but it took 6 years and a vanished sister to make me scream it to the world. My name is Emily, and this is the story of how I lost my family not to death, but to secrets, lies, and the courage it took to tear it all apart. Growing up in our small, sunlit house in suburban Ohio, life seemed perfect from the outside. Mom and Dad doted on Daniel, their golden boy. At 18, he was charming, athletic, and the kind of son who could do no wrong. His trophies lined the living room, his laughter filled our dinner table, and his future was the family's pride. I was the quiet middle child, content to blend into the background, sketching in my notebook while our little sister, Lily, only 10, danced through life with her wide, trusting eyes and infectious giggle. She adored Daniel. We all did. But love can blind you to the cracks beneath the surface. It started with small things. Daniel's temper, sharp and sudden, would flare when Mom and Dad weren't around. He'd snap at Lily for borrowing his headphones or leaving her toys in his room. I'd catch him gripping her arm too tightly, his knuckles white, her face twisting in pain. "Don't tell," he'd whisper, and she'd nod, too scared to speak. I told myself it was just sibling frustration. Older brothers could be rough, right? But the unease grew, a knot in my stomach I couldn't untie. By the time I was 17, the signs were undeniable. Lily started flinching when Daniel entered the room. Her laughter faded, replaced by a quietness that felt wrong for a girl who once sang to her dolls. One night, I found her curled up in her bed, clutching her stuffed rabbit, her cheeks streaked with tears. "He said I'm bad, Emily," she whispered. "He said I ruin everything." I held her, promising it wasn't true, but my heart pounded. What was Daniel doing to her when no one was watching? I confronted him the next day in his room, my voice shaking. "What's going on with you and Lily?" His eyes, usually warm and teasing, turned cold. "Mind your own business, Em," he said, stepping closer. "You don't want to start something you can't finish." His tone was a blade, and for the first time, I was afraid of my own brother. But I didn't push further. I was a coward, and that shame burns me even now. Life went on, the facade unbroken. Mom and Dad threw Daniel a lavish party when he got into college, their faces glowing with pride. Lily barely spoke at the table, her eyes fixed on her plate. I kept silent, too, telling myself I was protecting her by avoiding a fight. But silence is its own kind of betrayal. The twist came when I met Mrs. Carter, our elderly neighbor, a few months later. She was a retired teacher, sharp despite her age, with a habit of watching the world from her porch. One afternoon, while I helped her carry groceries, she fixed me with a knowing look. "Something's wrong in your house, Emily," she said. "I see things. Your sister's not herself, and your brother he's not what he seems." Her words were a jolt, like cold water on a sleeping face. Someone else saw it. I wasn't imagining things. Mrs. Carter became my confidant, the only one I could trust. She told me stories of kids she'd taught, ones who hid pain behind smiles, and taught me to watch for signs. I started keeping a journal, noting every time Lily seemed off, every bruise I saw, every late-night argument I overheard between her and Daniel. The pages filled faster than I expected. One entry read, "Lily's arm had marks again. Daniel said she fell. She didn't look at me when she nodded." My guilt grew heavier with every word. When Lily was 12, she vanished. It was a Tuesday, gray and cold. She didn't come home from school. Mom and Dad called the police, frantic, while Daniel played the grieving brother, his eyes red from crocodile tears. The police searched, neighbors prayed, and flyers with Lily's face covered every street. But I knew something they didn't. The night before, I'd heard Daniel's voice through the wall, low and menacing, followed by Lily's muffled sob. I hadn't checked on her. I hadn't opened her door. That failure haunts me like a ghost. Weeks passed with no sign of her. The police called it a runaway case, but I knew better. Lily wouldn't leave without her rabbit, still tucked under her pillow. I started digging, driven by a fury I didn't know I had. I went through Daniel's room when he was at college, searching for anything to note, a clue. In his desk, buried under textbooks, I found a locked box. I broke it open with a hammer, my hands shaking. Inside were photos of Lily, candid shots taken without her knowledge, and a notebook filled with his handwriting. Pages of rants about her disobedience, her weakness. One line chilled me, "She'll learn to be quiet, or she'll be gone." I showed the notebook to Mrs. Carter, who urged me to go to the police. But I hesitated. What if they didn't believe me? Daniel was the golden boy, and I was just the sister who never measured up. Instead, I kept searching, piecing together a timeline. I remembered Daniel's late-night drives, how he'd leave the house after Mom and Dad were asleep. I tracked his car's GPS history, something he'd shown me how to do years ago when he was still my hero. The data led to an abandoned lot 20 miles away, a place kids used for parties. My gut told me to go. I drove there alone at dusk, the sky bleeding red. The lot was empty, overgrown with weeds, but something caught my eye, a glint of metal near a pile of debris. It was Lily's locket, the one she never took off, tangled in the grass. My heart stopped. I called the police, clutching the locket like a lifeline. They searched the area and found traces of blood, too degraded to identify. It wasn't enough to arrest Daniel, but it was enough to break Mom and Dad. Confronting them was the hardest thing I've ever done. I showed them the notebook, the photos, the locket. Mom sobbed, refusing to believe it. Dad threw the notebook across the room, screaming that I was tearing the family apart. But the truth was a wildfire, and I couldn't stop it. I went to the police with everything, and they reopened the case. Daniel was questioned, his charm cracking under pressure. He denied everything, but the evidence piled off: his car's GPS, the notebook, a witness who saw him near the lot that night. The trial was a storm. Reporters swarmed our house, neighbors whispered, and Mom and Dad aged overnight. Daniel was convicted of abuse and suspected of worse, though Lily's body was never found. The jury believed she was gone, and so did I, though hope flickered like a dying ember. Mom and Dad cut me off, blaming me for destroying their son. I moved out, carrying only my journal and Lily's locket. Now, at 22, I live in a small apartment, working as a graphic designer. Mrs. Carter visits sometimes, bringing cookies and stories to keep Lily's memory alive. I started a blog, sharing our story to help others see the signs I missed. It's called Lily's Light, and every post feels like a letter to her, wherever she is. I don't know if she's out there, but I hope she knows I fought for her. I hope she knows I'm sorry. The truth cost me my family, but it gave me something else, a voice. I used it to expose the monster they worshipped, and I'll keep using it for every Lily out there, silent and unseen. Some truths are worth burning everything down for.